And then some of the disciples saw him. The women that went to the grave to bring flowers, they saw him, and they ran back to the rest of the disciples, and they told them that they saw the Lord and he was alive. And not all of them believed it. And so Jesus, when he finally showed up where all the disciples were gathered, he scolded them. He rebuked them for their unbelief and their stubborn refusal. You know, when it comes to the mission that we are on, and the gifting and the talents and the creativity and the opportunities and the things that are in us that God can use for the mission, church, you and I need to recognize that oftentimes the thing that keeps us from being on mission is that thing that fits in this gap between the life we're living and the unlived life that is within us. And here in this passage in verse 14, Jesus rebukes the disciples for their unbelief because he is about to commission them. He is about to commission them to go into the world and carry on the work that he had started before he went to the cross. And so he was getting ready to commission them to carry this work on because he's going to go back to the Father, and he's going to come back to take the church home back to him, back with him. But meanwhile, he needed them to carry on the mission. And so Jesus, when he was about to commission them, he knew that he had to deal with their hearts first, because there was a resistance. There was a resistance in them. I mean, here Jesus was. He was alive, and yet he saw that his disciples were struggling with the whole idea of a Jesus that is alive, and a commission where we can be in co-mission to see the world won for Jesus Christ. But there was this resistance. And you know, I thought it was really interesting that Jesus saw it in the disciples back then. And you know, as pastors, we see it even in the church today, this stubborn refusal of unbelief. And the thing is, there are so many people in the church who are living kind of sort of like, you know, casually when it comes to the mission of God, but they're not totally on mission because of unbelief about what God can do in and through them. And so therefore they are full of unbelief about what God can do with the creativity, with the gifts, with the talents, or the opportunities, or the potential that is in them. So I want to ask you tonight, church, what is it that is in the gap of your life between the life that you're living and the unlived life that is within you? I don't know what form unbelief takes for each and every one of us in this room tonight that is listening to this message. But I do know, church, unbelief can literally become the resistance that stands between where you're living and the way that you could be living. And it's a resistance, you know, that's not always a conscious thing or a tangible thing, but it is a resistance that stops us from living according to our God-given potential. You know, church, the life that you're living and the unlived life within you, what stands in the gap between those two things is the challenge that I'm putting forth to you tonight. You need to know what's in that gap. You know, a famous novelist by the name of H.G. Wells, he spoke of something similar when he spoke of success. Listen to what he said. He said, wealth, notoriety, place, and power are no measures of success whatsoever. The only true measure of success is the ratio between what we might have been and what we have become. In other words, success, it comes as a result of growing our potential. You know, church, resistance sometimes comes looking like procrastination. Resistance sometimes comes looking like fear. Oftentimes, it comes looking like rationalization, living life according to what makes sense to us. It can also come looking like self-sabotage. Let me explain to you what I mean. You see, when the Apostle Paul in the book of Romans spoke about the righteousness of God and bringing the message of grace, not through works or our own righteousness, but through Jesus Christ. In the middle of his speech to the Roman church, he said, "You may ask me, who can resist his will?" Well, guess what? A lot of us can resist the will of God. Oftentimes in our own lives, we don't see the ways that we are resisting God's will. But I would have you to know tonight, church, that oftentimes we do resist it. And the reason why we can't identify the resistance sometimes is because it comes in different ways. It comes by way of lack of acceptance of what God can do in and through us. It comes by way of us procrastinating about something that God may have laid on our hearts to do because he wants to use us, but because we lack confidence in ourselves and we lack confidence in God, we procrastinate and we put it off and we put it off. And so we don't see that as resistance, but it is. We don't see that as unbelief, but it is. I mean, because if I were to talk specifics tonight, I want to say this. I believe right now I am talking to people who have unwritten books and songs within them. And let me ask you, why are you not writing it? Well, whatever form or excuse that you come up with, let me just lay it to you. It's unbelief. Because you're thinking, Pastor, what if I write it and I can't find a publisher? What if I write my song and I can't find a producer? You know what? You may not be able to find a publisher or a producer. Some of you are even thinking, but Pastor, what if I write it and people don't like it? You know what? You're probably right. There may be some people that may not like it. But who knows what God can do in you having your life on mission. So instead of resisting through rationalization and living out your fears of what may or may not happen, or living your life procrastinating and thinking you'll do it another year or another time, what if you decided tonight that you would get your life on mission and you're going to close the gap between the life you're living and the unlived life that is within you? You know, there are some of you in this room tonight. There are things that you are so passionate about, and God has given you the ability to form words around your passion and bring life to a whole lot of other people. I'm talking, there are people here in this room that are listening to this message. You have an expertise to write manuals and curriculums and books in terms of the area of your expertise that could be of great help to other people. There are people that are listening to me right now, to this message, who have gifts and talents and skills that you can share, but you're not sharing them because you're stuck because of resistance. And oftentimes, church, it's unbelief. It's unbelief that God can actually use your life, that God can actually use your gift, that God can actually use your capacity and your ability to bless someone else. I want you to listen to me, church. Number 2 in your outline, the mission of God, it's not just for missionaries. The mission of God is for believers. And we can continue to write it off. Oh, that could never happen for me. I'm not that kind of person. How is it ever going to happen in my life, Pastor? I come from this kind of family. God, you see the family I come from. They are not a whole bunch of smart people. So God, why would you use me? I'm telling you, church, that is called resistance. That is called unbelief. Because, you know, and that's exactly what the disciples were struggling with when Jesus came to bring them the Great Commission. The whole idea that we could be on a co-mission with God, that Jesus could commission us to go out and make a difference, and that we would pray for the sick and the sick would be well. You know, I remember when I would call a prayer line for healing, and you know, I never say this publicly, but I'm going to say it tonight because I really want to get this point across. I used to feel so insecure about laying hands on people because in my mind I'm thinking, oh God, what if I lay hands and they don't get healed? What if I lay hands and they end up dying? What if I lay hands and nothing happens? You know, and I used to struggle. Those thoughts used to resist me when I would feel in my heart to go lay hands on somebody who's sick. And you know, and I remember struggling with that thought one day, and I remember God saying to me a couple of years ago, he said, Debbie, you're not the healer. I'm the healer. All I'm asking you to do is lay hands because I need a point of contact. You know, and ever since then, I started just being courageous. Not that I don't battle. Every time I'm going to go lay hands on somebody or people come up to me and ask me to lay hands on them because they're not feeling well, I always struggle with that thought. Oh my gosh, what if I lay hands and they don't get healed? And then I have to remind myself, okay, no, wait a minute. No, you're not the healer. God is. All he's asking you to do is be the point of contact. You know, and so that's just one example. But whatever the reason is for your unbelief and your stubborn refusal, you know, I want you tonight. I want to encourage you tonight. I want to encourage you, don't let that be your struggle again. Because the mission of God is not just for missionaries. It's for believers. You know, and we have just got to resist the resistance. That's number 3 in your outline.